All right, super excited to be here tonight with a bonus episode. Actually, the bonus episode was earlier. Super excited to share my most recently completed nature journal with all of you. And the new thing I'm going to start doing is only sharing these journals. As you can see, I have like 40 of them from the past. I've always done journal page flip throughs on the Nature Journal show. And what I'm going to start doing now is only making this available during the live. And then afterwards, it's just going to be available for my Patreons. But let's go ahead and jump right in. I'm going to switch to my document camera here so you have the best perspective of this nature journal. This one has been lots of cool places. It still smells like smoke because I was actually nature journaling during a live prescribed fire with this nature journal, and it was pretty intense. Some of you have probably seen some of those pages on my Instagram already, or in that episode I did. This journal also has a lot of these experimental pages where I've been looking at different artists and emulating their style, trying to adapt some of that style to my nature journaling. So this is something I want to recommend people do is sketchbooks, especially like these Stillman and Burns sketchbooks that I use, have quite good paper on the inside covers. This paper on the inside covers is worth using. There's no reason to not draw or paint on these inside covers. And the crazy thing is that since this paper is glued onto the cardstock of the cover, it often provides an even more receptive surface for heavier washes in watercolor paintings. So that's what this is here. I'll later add in my information. I put like the date range in my nature journals at the front. So I'll add that in here later. If you can guess what artist I'm looking at when I did this, you will win something. So far, no one has guessed. So I'll just go ahead and jump right into it. These are actually 2 pages that I left empty. I like to leave the first couple of pages empty sometimes when I start a new nature journal. So I left these 2 pages empty and then went back and added in these gesture drawings later. And I like to put the date when I do something like that. So I wrote down here that I filled these pages after finishing this sketchbook, and I put the date because sometimes it's useful to know what's going on there. And you can see these are just gesture sketches. So this is me trying to draw a live animal, in this case, my little pet snake that I have. And you can see that I'm using what I like to, one of my favorite words, iteration. So one of the best things about a nature journal is you can always turn the page, and really getting in those pencil miles and getting in those iterations is something I try to practice in my nature journal. So just trying to get the shapes as the snake moves. It's always challenging. You can also see here I'm doing some sort of metacognitive review, of feedback on my own drawings here, as I noticed that, oh, the way I drew the head here was wrong, and here it was more correct, the way it connects to the neck. Here's also sort of an experimental thing. This is when I was still, I've been testing quite a bit this Fude Demonin, especially when I first started this particular nature journal. So here I was doing sort of a little bit of a combination of testing. You can see I'm testing the lines here. I tested someone else's fountain pen right there. That was actually someone in a class. And then I'm also experimenting with washes. And this wash I did with some watercolor that I had left out in a container and filled up with like lint and stuff. So it's interesting to see how lint or dust mixed into your paint can actually create an interesting effect. So sometimes I do these sort of experimental pages like that. Then now this gets into the Trex. So this is the organization that does these training exchange programs for prescribed burns. And you might have seen this episode that came out, I think, a couple weeks ago from when I went up there and did this. So some of these pages might be familiar to you. Here is just sort of a sketch of a bunch of the people circled up and in a meeting to talk about the plan for this prescribed burn training exchange program. So I'm basically using some nature sketching, or I would say urban sketching techniques here at this class during the beginning. So this is the same kind of thing I would use if I were taking like a class in college. This is more information that I was learning from some of the different people that were presenting there. There was a bunch of science, fire scientists, ecologists, foresters, firefighters, all kinds of people. It was really exciting to try to draw the fire truck and some of the plumbing and stuff like that while they were pulling out the hoses and doing these activities. This is a classic time where you might be sort of hesitant to nature journal or sketch. That's what happens to me. But I tried to push myself and actually take out my sketchbook and try doing it during those times. Here was a class that Lori Wiggum taught, and we went up, and this was actually drawn with a twig. I have an episode coming up soon where I draw an entire tree with a twig. This is an example of that basic technique here. This is also with that technique done during the fire no, this was in a post-burn area. So this area was burned last year in the North Complex fire, which was one of the biggest fires ever seen in California. These pages were also done there. You can see I'm sort of doing more of just a fine art technique, but also just experimenting with how to use frames on a page. And I find that sometimes even if you don't put anything in the rectangle, it's just having the rectangle itself can actually be a nice element. Sometimes I call this a palette cleanser, just like an open space with nothing in it. I think of it as like a palate cleanser, like when you eat a little bit of bread between tasting wine. I love ponderosa pine bark, so practicing focusing on that a little bit in this burn area was really fun. And this was a really powerful moment for the community members that came to this workshop. The Plumas Fire Safe Council sponsored this, and there were community members who had experienced the fire, and many of them had been traumatized by the fire the previous year, but coming to this area and doing art and doing a little nature journaling workshop was therapeutic for them. Here's a page that I did. If you saw that video, you know that what happened to me here. What happened to me is I was trying to use this brush pen right here. I really like these. This is the, I think it's the Kuretake or Pilot brush pen. This is the pigment ink. And these are really fun to work with. But what I've noticed is that if you go through a major change in altitude, or if you go on a plane, sometimes when you first open it, it squirts out a bunch of ink all at once. So after I put in this drawing, I opened up this pen and just squirted a ton of ink on my page. And if you saw that episode, then you've seen how I tried to turn that accident into the rest of the drawing. And also one thing I want to point out here, this ink is supposed to be waterproof, so you can technically do watercolor over it. However, you'll notice here that especially when you use a really heavy amount of ink, it does this sort of transfer thing. So it can be a problem. However, what I really want to suggest is developing a fault-tolerant nature journaling style. So if you have a fault-tolerant nature journaling style, it won't be affected that badly by a little bit of smudging. So for example, while nature journaling during this prescribed burn that's coming up in a few pages, it's important for me to have a style that can handle a little bit of smudging on the page because there's charcoal and all of that stuff as well. So before I get into, this is the date of the prescribed burn, and I'm actually nature journaling, and let's see, it does still smell a little bit like smoke. But before I get into this, I'm going to look over here at the comments and just give some love, say hi to all of the people that I see who are commenting here. So Ivea is here, Nature Sketches is here, Jean is here, Agneta is here, Lori is here. Good to see you, Lori. And Tess is here also. So thank you all for joining in. This was really fun being invited to teach nature journaling at this prescribed burn training program was really cool because, as many of you know, I believe that nature journaling is more than just an art hobby. It is also a way of learning faster and improving learning and observation. So this was really a test of that, because these people that invited us to teach are not looking for someone to just be there and show them how to like paint like Bob Ross. These are people with serious jobs, and they actually believe that nature journaling can help them. So it was a great honor. And also it felt like a big responsibility as a nature journaling teacher to be like, okay, how can I make this applicable to what they're doing? So here's a couple sketches of that morning as everybody was getting organized for the fire. And we were mostly with these fire effects monitors. They're called FEMOs. And these are the people that train to be taking measurements of the weather. They use this portable weather station here called a Kestrel. These are able to measure a whole bunch of different weather elements. So it's sort of like what we do in our metadata in nature journaling, but even more advanced. And they do it during a prescribed burn. They have to do it every 30 minutes for some of the factors, and then they report it over the radio so that the burn boss and the other people who are in charge of the prescription, because they have a specific prescription for the controlled burn. And if the weather changes at any time, they would have to stop if the weather goes outside of their prescription. So it was really exciting and really fun to be there. This is my second time nature journaling at one of these burns, and just trying to apply nature journaling there is challenging because part of me just gets mesmerized by what's going on. And I had to work hard to try to do these sort of sketches showing, this is our team right here, Bryant, Oz, I can't even remember, Oz, Hannah, I think that was a nickname. Hannah, that's Lori Wiggum, the urban sketcher and other nature journaling teacher, and then Michelle. So this is a little shows the Kestrel, and this was our first weather measurement here at 12 o'clock. And the dry bulb is just the temperature. The relative humidity was 39% relative humidity. The wind was 2 to 5 miles per hour upslope. And then the fuel moisture is a calculation that you do that determines how dry the fuel is on the ground and how likely things are to combust. I did a quick sketch of some of the plants that I saw growing on the ground in this area before the test burn. So this was the very beginning, the test burn. This is a drip torch right here. This is what they usually use to get the fires going. It has a mixture of, I think it's diesel and gasoline in it. And so they do a little test burn. And drawing fire, if you've never tried drawing fire, especially with watercolor, it would probably be easier with acrylic or oils. But drawing it with watercolor, it's quite a challenging subject to draw. So, and smoke as well. So I've been practicing with that. But you can see here, this is the area when they first lit the fire. This is my next sort of weather measurement. And then this is the area, this is called the black zone. After the fire has moved through, this is called the black. And so for firefighters, this is often considered a safe zone. So one thing that's really interesting and counterintuitive for a lot of people is that once the fire has moved through an area, this totally black area actually becomes the safe place. And many people have survived forest fires by getting into this zone before a fire, because this zone has already had all of its fuel burned up. So that's the black, and that's how they make fire breaks as well. So it was really, really exciting, and I hope you all go back. I know a lot of you who are here watching right now have seen this episode because I took a lot of footage during the fire while we were nature journaling, and you can see this. But here you can see how this fire, this is the line, and you start in a prescribed burn, you start at the top of the hill and you move down, because if you start the fire at the bottom of the hill, it will go quickly and move up. Whereas if you start at the top and let it slowly move down, you have more control. Here is my attempt at sort of doing a diagram. Remember, diagrams are super important for communicating information. So I heard some of the fire professionals talking about dots versus strips. And that just has to do, you can see they're holding their drip torches here. And in this case, they're putting it down in dots. And in this case, they're laying down a full line of fire like that. And that has, different effects. And there is quite a bit of a science behind it, as Tess just pointed out. Just looking at the comments here. I see that Adam, my friend Adam, is here. That's awesome. Thanks for joining in, Adam. And Recovering Soul is here. Thanks for joining in, Recovering Soul. Welcome. I'm trying to see if anyone has any questions here. Maybe I'll save the questions a little bit for the end. Here is going back to that concept of diagram. Trying to use diagrams, especially in a situation like this, where this kind of painting is important for capturing sort of the context and the big picture and the information and the feeling. But sometimes a diagram is quicker, and you can show useful information such as the spacing of the trees or the estimated heights of trees. Also, I showed here this log that was on the ground and how the duff and the fuel had been cleared away from it because they were intentionally trying to leave things like this for habitat. Here is our 1400 hour weather data, and you can see what I'm doing here is what I like to do a lot now is I use my gray ink for most of my writing or information like that, and then for my drawings I use black. So this creates a visual hierarchy, and it's really useful for organizing information on the page if you can do something like that. So having two different colors helps you create a visual hierarchy. I know hierarchy sounds so bad. And when you are, studying about political science or whatever, yeah, hierarchy has a lot of problems to it. But as far as visual hierarchy, it's essential because it makes it easier for you to see what's going on and what's the most important. I see this comment from, let me share this. Oh, welcome, Sandra. Welcome to the channel. Let's see this comment from Adam. As far as I know, I think the windows have ended for most places. I know that there's some special exceptions. A local preserve just did a burn, I think last week, to promote wildflowers. And I think that there's actually like a fair amount of information being shared, and I think it's actually they're doing pretty good. So maybe Fox News was slightly misreporting on that. It seems to me like there's definitely a challenge with the communication of what's going on with the public, and there's definitely a lot of concern for good reason about prescribed burns. But I think that at this point, some of the statistics that people were sharing at the beginning of this training program were really interesting. And it's basically at this point, there's a bottleneck, which I tried to draw here, and there aren't enough people being trained and capacitated to do prescribed burns. And there's a ton of area that needs to have fuel reduction. And there's no way to mechanically or by any other means reduce the fuel in a safe way. And prescribed burns seem to be the most effective tool, and it's just a bottleneck around training. And so this TREX program, which is the Prescribed Burn Training Exchange program, started in 2009, and they're a collaboration with the Nature Conservancy. And they have been doing tons of these programs, even globally in a bunch of other countries, to help train more people and local people, not just professionals, to be able to do this kind of work on their own land. So like you can tell from the sweater that this guy's wearing, he's from the California State University Chico Ecological Preserve, and he's at this training so that they can learn how to use fire in their own location. Thanks for the silly question, Adam. No problem. All right, I don't know how to make that one go away. I'm going to keep going here. Here are some more where I did just trying to capture with watercolor what was going on. We did find some seedlings because that's one thing that's really important to look for and can be sometimes at counter purposes with fire prevention. So this is the vocab word that I want you to remember is recruitment. So a lot of our forests in California, if you look at them, there's no baby trees. There's old trees and there's no adolescents and there's no babies. And that's a really big problem. And once you start looking at this, it's not just in California, it's in a lot of parts of North America. Once you start looking at this, you start projecting into the future. You start imagining, wow, in 20 years, in 50 years, are there going to be forests in California? So it's really important to find these seedlings and to figure out management practices that can help with more recruitment of seedlings. I'm listening to a podcast right now talking about how big of a problem deer are in North America. Deer populations are bigger in North America than they've ever been historically, and they eat 12 pounds of plants a day, and they're often eating all of these little baby trees. Another thing is when people are using prescribed burns or other means to prepare an area to prevent the spread of wildfire, they're not necessarily thinking about this. In this program that we were doing, they were talking about it, but if you're trying to reduce these what are called ladder fuels, that's another term that's important. Ladder fuels are the fuels that allow fire to climb up into the trees. So fire does much better on the ground. If there's dry material on the ground, the fire can spread on that. Fire doesn't just like stay up in trees all by itself. So what it needs little bits of fuel. So like a little bush here, if there's a bush here underneath this tree, it can jump from the bush into the tree. So ladder fuels are often a target when people are doing prescribed burns or any other kind of management to prevent catastrophic fires. However, those ladder fuels are sometimes your next generation. So you have to find a balance there. And there was fire scientists and ecologists at this training program that were talking about that. Okay, so that was it for that trip. This was a little bit later. I was teaching nature journaling to some kids. Here is something that I don't do enough, but I know that Kate Rudder is actually going to be teaching a whole class on this. This entire page is trying to transcribe sound into my nature journal. So one thing that Kate Rudder pointed out recently in that interview I did last Wednesday with a bunch of Wild Wonder Nature Journaling Conference teachers is that we are very biased towards the visual when we're nature journaling. So this is a whole page where I was working with kids and we were trying to write down sounds of animals. There's also some, I think there's an ambulance on here. How would you record sound on paper? Super cool sort of synesthesia type technique. Even trying to do it is really useful. Really fun. This was a great class that I did with Stephanie Dole. I think Ivea might have been there as well. Stephanie Dole is an entomologist and she was doing her virtual bug drawing day and we were learning about isopods. Really cool. We were learning mostly about terrestrial isopods, but it was really fun to learn about them and do some sketching, and she brought out some. You can see here, this is a good example of a page where I planned to fill in more drawings for homework, but didn't end up doing it. That's what happens to me. So here, this is an isopod this isn't the actual size. So you might know these as roly-polies or sow bugs or potato bugs, or I think they have some other names, land shrimp. But these king isopods do get really big, not quite this big, but they are pretty big. And people are starting to keep them as pets now. They're detritivores mostly, and they're really good pets actually. And there's some like sort of designer ones, including these rubber ducky isopods. I recommend you look up rubber ducky isopod. This is actually a really cool thing to nature journal, and I did a whole video about nature journaling pets. And if you, for example, don't go out to wilderness places very much or don't have access, having pets at home is a great strategy for nature journaling and just for overall mental health and well-being. These isopods can be really easy pets, and some of them are super cute. If you just do a Google search for rubber ducky isopod, these are sort of like the gateway arthropod. Pretty much everybody thinks they're cute. They're not like cockroaches or tarantulas. Pretty much everybody thinks they're cute, and they're a great subject for nature journaling. So you can see here, I was just doing these quick sketches because these isopods kept moving. And Stephanie Dole had the live ones there on this Zoom video, and we were all trying to nature journal them as they were moving around. So you can see my approach. When something is moving, I just keep trying over and over again, kind of the same as with this snake. This is what I recommend you do when you're nature journaling live animals: iteration. Just keep trying over and over again, and at least get your pencil moving. And see, each time you do that, you actually do learn something, and you practice. I think this was for a class that I was teaching. These are also houseplants. So just showing, like, all of these nature journal pages are without leaving my house. These are, things that you could have as pets. These are houseplants right here. This is my pet tarantula. Some of you helped name this tarantula Tango. It's a little baby still. I don't know if it's a male or a female. Hopefully it's a female, because the females live way longer. So you can see this was just me trying to get a little bit of nature journaling in the evening. I can't remember where I was looking, where this tree was, but just trying to practice values, lights and darks. This is a leaf that I drew. I think this was for a class that I was teaching. This is a leaf. I think this is in my backyard on a salvia. Oh, I see Angie's here. Hi, Angie. And this is, guess which artist I am emulating here. So in this case, I'm actually looking at an artist that's in a completely different field from what I do and trying to see what I can learn from them. And I think there's certain things here that are really useful. Also notice that I'm taking notes of what drawing tools I'm using. So I use this Kuretake brush pen, and I was also using these zebra pins underneath. And these zebra pins are ones that Lori gave me. Thank you, Lori. She gave me a whole bag of these. So I was testing out some of the broad ones here and trying to use them for emulating this technique, because there's certain ways that cartoonists, and I'm gonna tell you who it is now. This is from copying from Bill Watterson from Calvin and Hobbes. Yep, there you go. Recovering Soul. Good job, Yvea. Nice. So really, I do believe that synthesizing aspects from very diverse fields can be helpful. So the way that Bill Watterson from Calvin and Hobbes captures foliage and vegetation, I still haven't figured out how he does these branches, but he has this amazing way of drawing like dead branches and also foliage that gives this three-dimensionality. You can see the way this black goes behind these branches here, and there's sort of just this silhouette. It's simplified because he has to draw fast when he was doing this for cartoons. And this is something that you can take to your landscape paintings when you're out nature journaling. This was nature journaling in my backyard, I guess. Oh, this was for a class that I taught for the Bellevue Botanical Gardens. So I actually taught a class. This was the first time I ever taught a class, nature journaling for gardeners. And it was for a botanical garden that's up there in Washington State. And we did it on Zoom. Of course, I taught them. I notice, I wonder, it reminds me of. And here's my page from that. I drew these flowers as sort of a demonstration, nature journaling from these flowers that I had. So that was a good class. I think this is part of that class as well. We talked a little bit about color, the importance of color, and the value strips as well. These are great exercises to do to understand color. And you've probably seen on the wall behind me, I'll just switch my camera here real quick, that I like to have this present. And this is from a class that I did, a color theory class that I did. So this star right here is a really useful tool, and also just a great practice when you're learning about color. And so I tried to demonstrate that for this class here with the primaries and the secondary colors. Really important, and just doing this kind of a practice, and then also even more importantly, can you control your values? So value is not good and bad. In this case, it's light and dark. So with whatever drawing tool you're using, practicing, seeing, can you get a wide range of values? And then how does that apply to your landscapes, for example? Am I covering this whole range? Or am I at least, you usually want to do, I usually try to do like maybe 4. So from my lightest light to my darkest dark, there is 0 through 4. And up here, I mean, here's an outline that I probably shouldn't have used an outline, but trying to think of it in those terms is going to make you a lot better. And then with each color, you can also do a value strip as well. Really important. These are basically what I would call push-ups for nature journaling or for art. The more you practice this, the buffer you will be, the stronger you will be in your art. It's like scales on the piano. I never studied piano, so I don't actually know what it would look like if I were playing the piano, but you practice the scales and it seems boring, but that's what makes you good for later on when you're playing Beethoven or whatever. So doing this kind of stuff over and over and thinking about composition. Here you can see a couple thumbnails where I'm talking about composition and practicing that in my nature journal and doing color swatches. Oh, this was my first nature journaling class that I taught. This was April 10th. This was the first nature journaling class that I taught outside since the pandemic, I think. So this was at Pepperwood Preserve, a really cool preserve in Sonoma County, doing a ton of really great research on climate, on forest in Sonoma County, even on Pinot Noir wine, I think. Super cool. And this was a class I taught there. And you can see that a lot of times at classes, I do the same thing. Look, I wonder, it reminds me of, we did a species profile looking at these plants. Oh, we saw swallows nesting. So I tried to capture the swallows in flight, tried to get a couple turkey vultures in flight. Look at that. That's a drawing of a bird. That right there is a bird. Even just trying to draw these things when you see them is better than not drawing them at all. Like, how hard would it be? This could be a complete nature journal right here in between my hands. See that? All you have to do is, have a couple things that you write with words, a couple quick sketches of a bird. Just imagine how much value that would add to your nature outing. And there's no excuse for not doing something like that. You could literally have a sketchbook this size in your pocket. I mean, this sketchbook is so small, it'd probably fit in your ear. And you could be with kids, you could be with maybe your partner or your spouse hikes really fast and you think you don't have time to nature journal. How long would it take you to do just these little birds and just write down 3 words? That's something that we could all do. The next level up would be maybe a plant. That's a super simple sketch of a plant, or like a tree with the birds nesting in it. And just by capturing that information onto a little sketchbook, even if it's a small nature journal, that's going to be really awesome and just add so much to your experience. Another technique is this timestamp technique. So just putting in, like, what time is it? Looking at your watch, what do you see at that place at that time? Do you see an oak titmouse making a sound? Or at 11:54, you see a calochortus lily. Just by having something like that, you could do that while you're hiking, would be a super great addition. And that's totally nature journaling. This is a joint comparison, so classic nature journaling technique. This was during a class that I taught. So in mine, I looked at a dry live oak leaf and a green live oak leaf, and I compared them. Here I tried to show me squishing one with my hand and feeling the difference in the texture. Oh, cool. Leslie is here. Hi, Leslie. Leslie, I know Leslie from Pencil Miles and Chill, and I think she was the second person to get the Pencil Miles and Chill traveling sketchbook. Here is a page where I'm doing some more experimentation. So you can see here, I am trying someone at that class that I taught had several different types of fountain pens. I was mainly using the Fude de Monin. So I tried her fountain pens, and next to it, I wrote the name and the type of ink and all of that. These are the Lamy Safari pens. And so that was cool to try those out. Some people really like those fountain pens. And you can see here, this is the Platinum Preppy. I think I broke this one. And that was one that Eli gave me. I don't think Eli's here tonight, but he often joins in during the lives, and he's a Patreon also. And then this is the Fude de Monin. So doing some testing, it's good to do this every once in a while, is just test your materials. Here, this is again Fude de Monin. Unfortunately, I've been having some issues with it, and it ran out of ink during my trip at the prescribed burn. But I do, in a lot of ways, really like it. Here's another class that I was teaching. I think this was the Nature Journal Family when I was teaching that one online back in April or May. And here, oh yeah, this is super fun. Okay, are you ready? This is a nature comic. I'm not going to talk for a little bit because I'm going to eat some chocolate, but I'm going to zoom in so you can read, because a comic is meant to be read in your mind. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in here on this comic and let you read it. And so it goes left to right because it's in English. If it were in Japanese or Arabic, it would not go left to right. But starting up here, go ahead and read this comic while I eat some chocolate. Maybe I should mute my mic when I eat chocolate. So read this bat comic. This was from a super, you might have seen this post on my Instagram. So this was my attempt in, I think, 15 minutes to make a comic based on a video. This is a video I posted on my Instagram. If you scroll back a ways, you can find it. I was hiking up this road next to my house and talking to my mom on the phone. And then on the side of the road, I found a bat lying on the ground. And so I went over there and I started looking at it, and I noticed there was blood on it. I got surprised. Whoa, a bat. You can see my eyes didn't actually pop out that much. Then I sort of like touched it with a stick. It grabbed onto the stick. I picked up the stick. The bat was hanging from the stick, and then it flew off. So obviously, from a nature journaling perspective, there's things here that are inaccurate. The bat's eyes did not actually look like that. Its face did not actually look like that. But this is a way to tell a story. I think you probably got the feeling of what happened here a lot more easily than if I sort of wrote it out with words or tried to do just a perfect drawing of a bat from a photo I looked up online. So that is really the power of nature comics. And comics are finally starting to get a little bit more credit. And we used to think comics was a genre, but comics is not about spandex clad superheroes. Comics is a way of telling a story. It could be about nature. It could be about history. It could be about a lot of things. It's not a genre. It's a perspective or a method of storytelling. And it's super useful in nature journaling, but it takes a lot of practice. We take it for granted. It's hard. Each one of the choices about how to show things in a different frame is really hard. So this was a class when I was teaching the Nature Journal family. This was a class where I tried to do this with all the kids. So I'm going to zoom back out. And if you haven't already, you should check out my Instagram. If you can spell my name which hopefully you can because it's in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen right now, then you can find me on Instagram. And if you scroll back, you can find this video of this bat. It was really cool, but you kind of get the idea just from that comic. That's what's amazing. And I really want to practice this more. It's not easy. It doesn't come naturally to anybody. You have to practice this to get better. So everyone in that class tried to make a comic based on the same video. So it was really interesting to see how all the different kids and their parents made comics from the same video. Then afterwards, we went back outside and we nature journaled outside. Now, here's something I want to point out. Sometimes when you see things in nature, this might be all that you see. Look, that is a bumblebee drawing, okay? Sometimes that is literally all you see and all you can capture. So just do it. Or this hoverfly right here. I guess I called it hover boy. I didn't see the wings. I sort of saw these legs, so I tried to draw them. But at least trying to capture that is going to get something on your page. Look at that bug. I didn't see all the details, but I tried to just capture it. I think someone else just joined in here that I haven't met before. Oh, Andrew is here. What's up, Drew? And Rose. Welcome, Rose. All right. So this was all nature journaling in my backyard during the Nature Journal family. Here's another example. I was looking at other artists and just doing some experiments, practicing looking at them and copying their style and seeing what I can learn. Obviously, it's slightly more abstract than what I would normally do in nature journaling. And then what happened to me here, I mean, I could probably rationalize it, but I think I got sort of precious with the way this looked and I just left the rest of the page blank. Oh, Eli's here. What's up, Eli? This was a class that I did with the Great Valley Nature Journal Club. Oh, Amaya's here too? Oh my gosh. Jeez, there's so many people here. This was a class with the Great Valley Nature Journal Club about watercolor. Lori Maloney co-taught. Brian Higginbotham was there because that's his group that he does, I think, every week? And Lori and JP were there, and we taught a class about watercolor. These are some sketches I did during Lori's presentation, and then this was the landscape. We taught a little class about how to paint a landscape. So that's that. Some of you might recognize these items. I use these a lot when I'm doing classes on Zoom, and I'm like, okay, let's draw this item, and I bring out this cactus. So funny enough, you might recognize this cactus, but do you notice anything missing? This piece of cactus that has been in my house for the last 6 months now has a growth on it about this big. So if you've seen this in my last video, it's already growing. This mushroom, on the other hand, is totally dried out and is not growing anymore. So here was, okay, another comic coming up soon. Lots of people think Canada geese are boring. And so the great thing about nature journaling is it makes everything interesting, including Canada geese. Like, look at this one stretching. I'm pretty sure it's farting right there when it's stretching that way, but I wasn't close enough to tell. But with a nature journal approach, if I were just birding, I would have walked past these. I wouldn't have even gone to this park if I was birding because I would have been too jaded. But for nature journaling, it's like, wow, there's a bunch of Canada geese there. I'm going to try sketching them. And I actually learned things like, did you know that their legs point inwards like that? There's quite a noticeable angle to how their legs point inwards. So how does that affect its balance when it stands on one leg, when it's doing this weird stretching, farting maneuver? So like, that's the kind of thing about nature journaling that is so amazing. I was teaching these kids and we were like, okay, let's nature journal these geese. And they did some crazy things. Like, I tried to capture the sound and the movement of this. I don't know if it was a territorial display, but this one was making some crazy noises. So I tried to capture that. And also notice here, I'm varying my size. This is where your metacognition plays a role in nature journaling. If you notice over here, almost all of my geese are pretty much the same size. That head is is zoomed in, right? But a lot of times we always draw at the same size. So this is where a journal can help you notice your patterns and hopefully change them for the better. Because what is the reason why you're always drawing at that same size? Is that just what's easiest, or is there actually like a reason why that's better? Usually not. So if you notice that, try drawing different sizes. So here I made one quite a bit bigger. Here I tried to show the movement as it made that sound. And here is a comic. So I'm going to zoom in on this comic so you can actually read it, and then I'll talk it through. But remember, left to right, like a regular comic. I shouldn't have to say that unless you've been reading lots of manga lately. And while I'm doing that, I'm going to go put a piece of cardboard in the window to block the sun. So we saw a really cool thing with these geese, and I tried to capture in here. Now, this is the kind of thing where, obviously this isn't exactly what the goose looked like. The goose is not really thinking, so I am anthropomorphizing, but as long as you know you're doing those things, it's okay. It's not a scientific journal. So basically, I pretended like I was giving food to this goose, and then this other goose that was far away started to walk closer, and then it ran over, scared the other geese, and then while we were standing there in amazement, it emitted this voracious, victorious dinosaur sounding sound. So this is not very objective or scientific, but this captures a feeling that will help me remember that moment and help those kids that I was teaching remember that moment forever. And so I think finding the balance between being like, completely honest in your record of like what you see literal is one thing, but also being able to incorporate some of your qualitative experience is important, because I really think we're not objective. No matter how hard we try, no one, even scientists who are studying physics and atoms and stuff like that, they are realizing that their objectivity is not really completely attainable. We also got to draw these fish. We went over to the pond and we got to see these fish, and so tried drawing those. This is why I just reprinted business cards, because this lady came up and asked about nature journaling and stuff like that, and so I just ripped a piece of paper off for her because I didn't have a business card. Oh, this was a super fun trip. This recently came out in a video that many of you have probably seen, but let me zoom out a little bit further. This was when I went nature journaling at Sugarloaf on the Lower Bald Mountain Trail to find these whispering bells. These flowers only come up after a fire. These flowers cannot grow if there has not been a fire. Bye, Anetta. Bye, Nature Sketches. This flower will only grow in an area after a fire has been through. So I went there to find this specific plant, but I also saw other cool stuff while I was there. If you watch that video, I think that video came out already. Yeah, that one came out already. That video, I do this sidebar thing where I put all this extra information in there, like what birds I saw, what deer I saw, because there were some cool deer that came through. So I did all that in the sidebar. And the really funny thing is that where I tore out my paper to give to that lady as a business card, it like matches perfectly with the Canada goose doing its dinosaur sound. And this is something that I don't do anymore. But if you have an X-Acto knife, you can sometimes cut windows into your page and do interesting things like this, where it shows through. It's almost like a children's book where it shows through stuff from the previous page. So I kind of like how this Canada goose is like popping through onto the fire following flowers page. But that was really fun. And like Lori said, nature is super distracting. Like there was deer, there was this lizard. Oh, and if you have to watch that video, because there is a jackrabbit runs right past me in this fire falling flowers video. So while I'm nature journaling, while I'm painting this landscape, I'm there for like 15 minutes. I'm talking. Suddenly this jackrabbit goes like within a couple feet of me, and it's caught on video. So that was a really fun episode. I think that was just that came out not that long ago. Here's just some sort of quick sketches. I think this is stuff at home. Actually, that's an orchid plant I have growing at home. This was another class. So I went and I nature journaled outside, and these are lizards in my backyard. And I'm trying to nature journal where they were on this retaining wall. And this is the kind of thing a lot of times I don't draw. It's a retaining wall. It's kind of boring. I wasn't sure if I would be able to capture what it looks like, and I don't think it really reads. It's not super apparent what that is, but it's really important because it's a west-facing retaining wall, and the location of the lizards on this wall is really important. So if I weren't being self-aware and really sticking to my intentions with nature journaling, maybe I would just do these and then feel complete and feel sort of blocked around doing this. But I did try to do it anyways, and I'm glad I did because it captured important information. I also saw this spider when I started looking at I was looking at this flower because I noticed flies were coming to this flower, and that these western fence lizards, aka bluebellies, were eating the flies. But then when I got closer, I saw there was a spider hiding on one of the flowers, and it had caught a fly. So I tried to at least draw that. You can see I'm using timestamps here as well. This was the Nature Journal family. I wouldn't remember that if I didn't have metadata. So another good reason to have metadata. I also have the temperature and the wind. And it turns out I just went to find reptiles. I went looking for reptiles with a friend yesterday. And it turns out temperature, amount of sunniness, and wind really affects reptile behavior. So metadata, metadata, metadata. If you don't put your metadata on your page, you're going to get an F from the teacher. No, you don't get any credit for your page if you don't have metadata. On that note, oh shoot, I guess I get no credit for this page because I did not write any metadata. Maybe it goes with that page, I'm not sure. Ooh, this is from a video. I don't think this video came out yet. No, it didn't. So this is nature journaling a charismatic old tree. And I went back after nature journaling in the rain. I asked all of you if you wanted me to nature journal or draw that old tree. That was a couple months ago. It was pouring rain. I was out there nature journaling in the rain. And I asked if people wanted me to nature journal that tree. So I did. I went back there and I did this. And I think that video is coming out on Sunday. Is it coming out on Sunday? Yes, this Sunday, the video is going to come out where I show you how I drew this. And I actually drew this with a broken off twig from this very same tree, dipped into ink, and then I drew this. And yes, I love drawing old trees too. And this was super fun. That video is coming out on Sunday at 1 p.m. You can hit the notification bell and make sure you know when it's coming out. That was really fun. This was a wildflower collection. This is with some kids I'm teaching. We had a competition to see how many different types of flowers we could find and draw them. A collection is a classic nature journaling technique. You've probably seen my video where I taught this. It was actually with Andrew Rosales' help. I don't know if he's still here watching this live, but he was commenting earlier. And he showed me around at Cabrillo National Monument in San Diego, and I did a video about how to do a collection. A collection is basically when you nature journal a bunch of things that are in a similar category. Here you can see a page where I'm just sort of messing around and testing different stuff out. I think I'm using this Fude de Manin pen, and you can also see I'm smudging it and just trying to figure out, like what kinds of lines can handle sort of the fault tolerance. Like, what can I do that will actually still look okay even if it gets smudged? Because I want to be out in the field, be able to have water fall on this, birds poop on this, charcoal smudged on this and it still look okay and not have me freak out. The way I used to draw was all like really fine mechanical pencil. If anything happened to the page, I would freak out. So this is a continuation of this page. Sometimes when I'm nature journaling, I accidentally get 2 pages stuck together, kind of like when you're counting money and 2 $20 bills are stuck together. So I started doing this as well on the same outing. So this is coming out in that video this Sunday, how to nature journal a charismatic old tree. And this is with a twig. I drew this with a twig. It's a twig from the very same tree I was drawing. So kind of cool and symbolic. Dipped into ink and then just scraped onto the paper. Cheap ink that's coming out really soon. It's always a fun technique. And here you can see I did my metadata a little bit differently. I'm going to zoom in on that. I've been experimenting. Sometimes it's good to, be consistent. I usually keep my metadata really consistent with the gray pen, kind of do the same thing every time. But this time I experimented with bigger metadata. I even sort of have like a map built into it showing my location. You can see me sitting under the tree. That is, one of these is the tree I'm drawing. That's the tree I'm drawing. That is a path. So this captures a lot of information really quickly in my metadata. Here is sort of the distracting information of, birds flying by, stuff like that. And you'll see more of that in that episode that's coming out this Sunday. So that's a fun strategy with the dip pen. Fault tolerance, talking about fault tolerance. This was during a class, an online class. And the main thing is to nature journal more, because then you get more pencil miles, more paint kilometers, more fun, more nature, more learning, better art. But if you worry at the beginning too much or things are getting messy and that freaks you out, then you're not going to nature journal more. You're not going to get in more pencil miles. You're not going to have more fun, not going to experience more nature. You're not going to learn more, and you're not going to make better art. So don't focus on the art at the beginning, and in the end, you'll actually get better art. Here's an experiment I was doing. This is new. This was low tide. This is seaweed. This is the ocean and rocks. And this is experimenting with this art tool. This is a really cool ink brush. So this is basically the same shell as the water brush I use for all of my watercolor, but it's filled with gray ink. And I love this gray ink. It's a little bit darker than the gray ink that is in my Pilot Fudayaku pen, a little bit darker than that, but it's in a brush pen. So it has bristles. They're not like from an actual animal. They're synthetic bristles, but you get the effect of a brush pen. And I've been experimenting doing some landscapes with that. And just like what Gene said, I experimented again with including not exactly a map, but sort of a map in my metadata. So you can see here, I've drawn this sort of simplified version of the arch rock. This is a part, you can see there's a car and a person standing up there on the cliff into my metadata. So like, how can we be more creative about our metadata? Because metadata is a really powerful tool. Here's sort of like my standard landscape-ito, but I mean, just in grayscale. And then this is an experiment at just doing a little bit of a bigger one and using a brush pen with gray ink. You can find the link in one of my previous videos to this pen. I'll put in the link on this one later. But actually, this video is not going to be available later except for people who are on my Patreon. So that reminds me, I'm just going to do a little plug for my Patreon because I never do. And I'm usually talking about all of these other people's cool businesses and stuff like that. But my Patreon is actually the main thing that supports me doing the Nature Journal show right now. So I super appreciate everybody. I mean, half of the people who are on here, or 7 out of 10 people who are on here, are already supporting me on Patreon. And I really appreciate all of you. You're awesome. And so what I'm going to start doing in the future is these Nature Journal shares are only going to be available to the public during the live show. So lucky all of you that are here now. And then afterwards, I'm going to unlist them and they'll only be available for Patreon patrons. And guess what? It's can be as little as $1 a month. $5 a month is even better. There's going to be a party coming up, but it's basically like that's $12 a year. It's not that much money, and it helps me out. The more people that support on there, the better. Here's some warm-up quick sketches. This was from the Nature Journal family. So this is the class I was teaching online. I'm not doing that this month, but this was for that class. Was really fun. These are all things that I could see my spot in Nature Journal outside. This is looking out my window. Got this crazy tree tobacco growing out there. It attracts tons of hummingbirds. And here you can see, this is the technique that I like, that I think is really fault tolerant. Watch, I'm going to do something crazy. I'm going to spill water on this page right now and show you that this is fault tolerant. Oh, God. Maybe that was a bad idea. But this is the style that I'm working on towards being like more fault tolerant. And so what you can see is I'm using this Pilot Futoyaku pen. Also, even if it did get some marks on it, like I could, let's see, let me put this on there too. This is a crazy drawing tool from when I used to do figure drawing classes. And I'm just going to kind of go like this on here, just to kind of simulate messiness. And what I'm noticing is that even with a torrential amount of water spilled on it and a bunch of like crazy graphite, this still looks fine. You know, this still reads. You can still see what is going on here. The colors read and the information reads. And that's because I'm developing a fault tolerant style. So I'm using this Pilot Futoyaku pen. It has black on one side and gray on the other side, and the black is waterproof. And then I'm using watercolor. So I have got this strong outline in ink. This strong outline in ink and these big letters up here stand out. I have visual hierarchy and I have bold lines that I make quickly. I was teaching a class to a bunch of screaming children when I did this. So if you have children or animals, or you're actually nature journaling in the field, a fault tolerant style is going to be super helpful. And you can see I just spilled a bunch of water, like probably 50 milliliters of water onto my page, scribbled all over it, and it still reads. So if that's not worth a thumbs up right now, I don't know what is. So go ahead and hit the thumbs up button and check out my Patreon page and develop a fault tolerant style in your own nature journaling. I can see that this pink that I used, this watercolor, is not completely staining. So some watercolors will smear if they get re-wetted. And sometimes that's actually good for certain watercolor techniques. For fault tolerance, it could be a problem, but knowing which of your watercolors are are water soluble and which ones are staining is good to begin with. So continuing onwards. Oh yeah, this was another awesome. Ivea was here on this trip. This was an awesome nature journaling trip. The first time I got a nature journal with a bunch of my friends since COVID. This was at the San Francisco Zoo. There were lemurs, there were kudu. I did some landscape, quick landscape paintings. You can see this is also using that quick fault tolerant style, really blocking in those values fast by using black ink. I used to use graphite a lot more, and it would have taken me 5 times as long to do this page, and it wouldn't show up on the camera. It wouldn't be as fault tolerant. It wouldn't be as bold. So starting with ink right away can be really helpful. You can see here in my metadata, I included all the people that I was with: Amy Schlesser, the Beetle Lady, aka Stephanie Dole, and her children, Ivea, John Muir Laws. Oh my gosh, I can't read that one. Carol, oh yeah, Amelia and Caroline, those are John Muir Law's kids. Akshay and Gargi, and then Griffin and Beatrice are Stephanie Dole, the Beetle Lady's kids. These are the ring-tailed lemurs. really fun to draw. I tried to draw this one licking water. That's not what its face actually looked like. So this was all done there in the field. Just want to point out really quickly on this kudu, it was really helpful to have some opaque white. Opaque white is one of those things that is challenging for watercolorists. So watercolor is transparent, and that means it's hard to put pale things on top of light things. But this animal has pale stripes on top of dark things. And if you're trying to just paint around that, it's a real pain. So I've done reviews of my materials before, but these are basically the only options. I mean, there's a few other things, but these are the two white opaque tools that I think actually work well. I've tried a whole bunch of different ones, but this Presto Jumbo correction pin and the Signo are basically the ones that I use for that kind of stuff. It really helps. Giraffe action. This was some thought-based stuff. Flamingos and birds. There were peacocks walking around, and since the peacocks were not inside the enclosures, it was really funny because sometimes people were like, am I supposed to be looking at that? Or should I just be looking at the animals that are in enclosures? Like, because there's seagulls and pigeons walking around too. There was a snow leopard, a rhino sleeping, penguins, Komodo dragon. Oh man, that was so fun. So fun to draw Komodo dragon. I must point out that a lot of this color was added afterwards. Sometimes I do add color afterwards. Komodo dragon. This is super fun. This is a video that's coming out soon, but I actually caught this crab and was holding it. This was a big crab. It was like that's the actual size of the pinchers. So like that would definitely break my finger. I was holding this crab. You have to hold them by these back two legs. I was holding this crab and drawing it at the same time. And that video is coming out soon. That was super fun. Here's an experiment with sort of, slightly different style of landscapeito. Cute crab face. Adding a little bit of humor sometimes is helpful. Oh yeah, here, look at this. The Komodo dragon was blowing steam on the glass. Blowing steam on the grass. I think Andrew Rosales might be at a different stage in the video than everybody else. Here is a landscape painting I did from inside of my car. That video is coming out next Wednesday, a week from today. I was sitting in the back of my car looking out and painted this. And this is all watercolor. I usually don't do this style, but this is watercolor with no drawing, just watercolor. Yes, I love Lori's comment. I'm going to have to go back to that one because that is just so funny. Oh, don't you just want to kiss that crab? It's so cute. So here's some more sort of more diagram style stuff at the low tide, trying to figure out like what things are growing at the different heights on the rock. Here is me looking at another artist. And this is an artist that I've been trying to get some ideas from. If you can read Cyrillic, then you know that's their name right there in Cyrillic, if you can read the Cyrillic alphabet. But I'm trying to practice. I was copying the way that he draws trees and especially the sky holes. And then over here, I went and looked out my own window and saw that there was like the exact same, the perfect kind of thing in nature for me to practice these techniques. So there's a lot of illustrators and fine artists, could even be from children's books or comics like Bill Watterson that could apply to things that you're doing in your nature journal. This was a class, this was a thing I attended from Brian Higginbottom, and it's the Great Valley Nature Journal Club. And I was doing a little bit of sketching sort of on the side. He was talking about Elizabeth Blackwell, who is this amazing, Lori Line guessed it, Either Lori knows Cyrillic or she knows who I'm talking about. But that's literally like, this guy right here is one of my favorite artists of all time. And I shouldn't give this away. I shouldn't give my inspirations away because it's more mysterious when you don't tell people who your teachers are. But Yvonne Billybean is like one of my favorite artists of all time, for sure. Amazing. Amazing. And if you're trying to look up his books at the library and you live somewhere in Northern California, you're not going to find them because I have all of his books from the local libraries in the entire Northern California area. Also, Gauguin, if you're looking for any Gauguin, Yvonne Billybean, or Bill Watterson, or Winslow Homer. I pretty much have all of those books at my house right now. I think I returned some of the Winslow Homer. So this was awesome. Brian talked about Elizabeth Blackwell. She did this entire book showing plants. It was an herbal, is what they called them back then. Basically like an encyclopedia of plants and their uses. Really cool, a really great art. That was a fun class, so I tried to copy some of the sketches from that. Then this was at Pencil Miles and Chill with Ivea. I think I took some notes about where everybody was coming from. Did some sketches while we were there. I can't remember what else I was working on during that class, but that was fun. And then practicing drawing my True Tobacco Outside, just going straight to watercolor. I've been practicing this, going straight to watercolor without using ink, and how to reserve my whites and everything else. Here it is again. So trying to figure out how to be a little bit more painterly and focus on like capturing the lights and darks just with watercolor, straight to the watercolor without the ink, without the drawing underneath. This is straight ink looking out my window at sunset. How can I capture the light, reserve those pale values, stuff like that. And here I kind of give away some of my favorite artists right now: Billybean, Bill Watterson, Mike Mignola, Paul Gauguin. I don't like Gauguin's nudes per se, his figure drawings. A lot of people really focus on how he drew Tahitian naked women all the time. I'm really interested in the way that he drew trees and landscapes and divided space in particular. Here are some lizards that I drew. More lizards, more sort of like experiments. I think I was testing out fountain pens. This was a class. Oh, nature journaling broken eggshells that we found. Oh, hello, Stephanie, new person joining in. These are just drawing some objects around home. Sometimes I just do some warm-ups like that. I think this was actually drawing while watching something on Netflix. So one thing I want to point out, I'm going to switch camera here just to emphasize this. But one thing I want to point out is, I'm not going to go on too big of a rant about this, but we live in a society that really focuses consumption and not creation. And it's always easy to just sit around and consume other people's creations or just consume content on TV or watch Netflix or whatever. It's harder to do a sketch or do a drawing. How can you mix in a little bit more creation into your life instead of just consuming other content? So here's an example, and these are really bad drawings. These are pretty bad drawings, I would say. But instead of just watching a show, I was like, okay, I'm just going to do a couple quick sketches. Drawing people, drawing faces is in my comfort zone. But that's the reason why most of us just fall into a consumption place instead of a creation place, because you have to be vulnerable when you create. And so instead of just consuming passively, maybe there are ways that you can mix a little bit of creativity and creation into your own life. And even if your focus is on nature journaling, plants or animals, maybe just doing a little bit of sketching when you're watching TV could actually be beneficial, and just, build in a little bit of that creation instead of just consuming all the time. Here's one more sort of thing I kind of was taking. So this is sort of from Paul Gauguin. And you can see what I'm really interested in is the way that he divides space. This is not completely based on one of his paintings. In fact, this is like a springtail in the foreground, but I'm interested in how he divides space. And this is an index. I'm really working on these creative indices, and I really want to make indexing sexy again. An index is a really powerful thing. And if you just mix a few cartoony, I mean, look how bad that drawing is, but it adds information, a little bit of bubble letters. How hard is that? You know, a little bit of Bill Watterson trees, a little bit of whoever I was practicing from there, a little bit more fires and the Whispering Bells, that collection, Komodo Dragon, Beely Bean. You can see Arch Rock. Now that you followed through on this whole journal page flip through, share, whatever you want to call it, nature journal with me, hashtag journal with me, you will see, like, now that you've been through this whole thing with me, you can kind of see, look, there's the crab, there's the Arch Rock, oh, there's the Watercolor Great Valley Nature Journal Club, the geese, oh yeah, I remember that. So this is the kind of thing that you can do in your own nature journal, and this is where you can take it to the next level, because I'm telling you, once you start having 10, 20, 30, 40 nature journals under your belt, it's going to be hard to remember like where things are, where to find that. And doing this kind of indexing will make it so much easier, is mixing a little bit of visual hierarchy, using bubble letters, using bigger letters, using some images. Like this little image right here is enough for me to remember, oh yeah, that's that drawing of the tree with Yvonne Billybean. Or this is that one, you know, the golden hour, the sunset hour, drawing that watercolor out my window. So those are the kinds of things, you know, that on a meta level can help you kind of nature journal better and index your nature journals. Here's sort of this last page I did, some more experiments. I really suggest, if you are a nature journaler, look at fine art every once in a while. What are things you can just try copying or kind of experimenting with different techniques? These are actually Paul Gauguin woodcuts that I was getting inspired by, mixed in with a little bit of Mike Mignola, who is in a totally different genre. Look him up. I'm not going to make the homework easy for you. And then how can you synthesize those? So taking from as diverse and crazily disparate influences as you can and mix those together. Here's a little experiment with some gold paint that I did on my last page, and just trying to fill every page of your nature journal. That's my nature journal share for today. This video will no longer be available for anyone to watch after the live unless you're a Patreon. So definitely check out my Patreon if you haven't yet. We're going to have a party coming up in the summer, a Zoom party. It'll be super fun. And from now on, these journal shares are just going to be for people who show up for the live or people who are patrons. So thank you, all of you who joined in. I love how many people showed up today for this one. Recovering Soul, Adam Taylor, Lori Line, Angie, Eli, Ivea, Stephanie Taylor. A bunch of these people are actually already patrons, which is really great. And thanks to all of you for joining in today. And I will be gone for like a week and a half, but I have a bunch of videos scheduled. So you will get to enjoy those over the next like week and a half. Thanks for joining in so much. All of you are awesome. And remember, try to create also, not just consume. So I hope I inspired you to go out there and create some of your own nature journaling or whatever, music, food, your own art, your own films, instead of just consuming stuff that other people make and sell to you. All right, bye everybody. Have a good one.